Hello, everybody. Welcome back. In this part of the lecture, we're going to be talking about steroid hormones. And the main question that we're going to be answering here is, what are the properties of steroid hormones? Okay, so I just want to remind you that we can divide our hormones into three main chemical classes. We have the peptide hormones, which we just talked about, steroid hormones, which I'm going to be covering here, and then also the amine hormones. Okay, so let's get started talking about steroid hormones. Oh, okay, so first of all, steroid hormones are all synthesized from one precursor molecule, cholesterol. Okay, so they're all made from cholesterol. This diagram shows the synthesis pathways for a variety of steroid hormones. So we've got estradiol, which is a reproductive hormone. We've got cortisol, which is a kind of a stress hormone. And then we've got aldosterone, which is involved in like salt balance. Okay, so here are a couple questions for you. When I tell you to, please pause the recording and answer these questions. Looking at these structures first, are they hydrophilic or hydrophobic? So that's your first question. Second question is, could they be stored in vesicles? Okay, so go ahead and pause and answer those questions. Okay, so let's go over the answers to those questions. Okay, so are these molecules hydrophilic or hydrophobic? They are hydrophobic. So looking at this structure here, you can see that there are not very many, oh, well, I guess this is cholesterol, but looking at these other structures, you can see that there are not very many polar groups on them. They're mostly non-polar, okay? And then could they be stored in vesicles? No. They are not storable in vesicles because they're hydrophobic, right? So since they're hydrophobic and since membranes are also hydrophobic, what's going to happen is these molecules are going to easily be able to cross membranes, right? So if you try to store it in a vesicle, it's just going to cross through that membrane and leave the vesicle, okay? So it's not going to work to store it in a vesicle. Therefore, steroid hormones are just made like on command. You can't store it in a vesicle the way you can with peptide hormones. You can't just make a bunch and have it ready to go for when you get that signal to release the hormone. It doesn't work that way for steroid hormones. For steroid hormones, what happens is, you need to get that signal to make the steroid hormone. Steroid hormone is made, and as soon as it's made, it just goes out into the body, okay? Okay, let's take a look at this. How are these guys transported? So we're gonna start with this question here. Again, I'm not necessarily looking for right or wrong answers, but I do want you to sort of engage and really sort of think about what you think the answer to this question is. Okay, so how water soluble would you expect steroid hormones to be? Okay, go ahead and pause and answer that question. Okay, so hopefully you wrote down something. And we did kind of cover this in the last slide, so I hope you were able to answer this question fairly easily, right? Steroid hormones are not going to be very water soluble. They're hydrophobic, okay? But what I'm illustrating on this slide is some of the implications of that, okay? So because steroid hormones are not very water soluble, they're not going to be able to dissolve easily in the plasma. Okay, they're not just going to be able to float around in the plasma the way we saw with peptide hormones. Instead, what's going to happen is they're going to need sort of a companion molecule to help them be transported in the bloodstream. Okay, so that is what is illustrated here. We have our steroid hormone shown in yellow. it can't really hang out in the bloodstream by itself, so it is accompanied by this protein carrier molecule, okay? Another implication of this is that if once you have that protein carrier kind of protecting that hormone molecule, um, that actually protects it from degradation by enzymes as well, okay? So you're going to end up having a longer half-life for your steroid hormone, right? So remember with the peptide hormones, those guys were floating around freely in the plasma, um, and they were easily accessible by the enzymes that are in the bloodstream, whose job it is to break down hormones. For these guys, since they're protected by the protein carriers, it's going to be harder for those enzymes to get to those hormones. Therefore, they're going to last longer in the bloodstream. So they have a longer half-life, an hour or more, can be several hours.